Well, the biggest story of the weekend, I think, will unfold at West Coast. Tom, I know you had some strong thoughts about Adam Simpson and his future. What's the latest?
The reports last week that there was unrest within the playing group were accurate, but they can easily be dismissed as players who aren't playing or players who are playing out of position. Every team, as you know, Kane, would have 20 or so players that are frustrated because they're not playing in a team at any given time. But Sammy Edmund reported this on Saturday as well. I followed it up. It's true. There are senior players at West Coast who would like a change of voice. And this is not because they lack respect for Adam Simpson or they dislike Adam Simpson or even they don't rate Adam Simpson. They just believe that it's become a bit stale and they need a fresh voice at the club. Now, whether this translates into Adam Simpson being sacked this week or next week or the week after, I'm not sure. But it's reached a point in recent times where these views aren't just held by young players who can't get a game, they're also held by experienced players. And my question to you is, for a long time, we've spoken about Adam Simpson, but Adam Simpson's football mortality has been staring him in the face now for a good probably 2 years. And before I get your thoughts, I want to have a listen to what he had to say after the game because I think he understands it in a very pragmatic way. It might be next week. It could be the week after. I would be surprised if Adam Simpson was coaching West Coast next year. That is my information.
You're suggesting you wouldn't be shocked if it happened this week.
Yeah, I wouldn't be completely shocked if it happened this week. No.
I want to go back to something Don Pike said to Damien Barrett on afl.com.au, and it wasn't the only platform that Don Pike said in terms of how they are going to be judged this year. He said, every club is pretty similar. You want to turn up on game day and have a crack and play with spirit and play in a way that engages you, he said. And there's a little bit of that I want to see them get better. I want to see the future. Those things are measurable. You'll be able to see them and feel them. You know that vibe when you go to a footy game, they may not be a guarantee every week, but you see it and you feel it when it is working. You don't see it. You don't feel any sort of vibe whatsoever with the Eagles. And if that is what the new CEO says he's going to judge his coach and his players on, you think they are failing miserably in that. There is no spirit. There is no energy. There is no vibe when you go to a West Coast game. You turn up yesterday to the MCG against a Melbourne team out of the 8, not flying at all. And you know the game's over at quarter time. And that's what you don't want. And that's been largely the case for the Eagles. I mean, we can all see it. I've said this 3 years ago. I wrote a column in the West Australian suggesting that the cliff is coming for the Eagles. And if they don't do something with their list management, it's going to head this way. And it's headed exactly this way. And I think Adam Simpson is a reasonable part in this. I think he let standards slip for too long there for a long period of time. And now that the bad habits have rubbed off on this playing group to the point where senior players are whinging. What are the senior players whinging about? I mean, they're culpable in this as well. So, yeah, they need a change of voice. They need a circuit breaker. I've said this a million times, and I wouldn't be surprised either if that happens pretty soon as well.
Sometimes things just come to an end. It happened with Nathan Buckley at Collingwood, happened with Leon Cameron at GWS. Sometimes it's time for a shift.
But he's
coach,
right.
No worries.
But he's right, Adam Simpson. There's a lot of pain because it's going to face this club for a long period of time, regardless of which coach is there. Do you have it? Do you have a name? Do you have is it a Dean Cox type?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've got no idea. I don't even know if it's going to happen today. I'm not pretending to say.
No, you just said you wouldn't be surprised.
Wouldn't be surprised now. Yeah, the narrative is shifting over in Perth. And how can you be in a rebuild with one good young player? Like they've got some other reasons.
I think it was damning last week against Hawthorn where they were actually about 12 months older.
That's right.
Than the Hawks.
So they're still on the way down. West Coast.
All right, let's move on because is one of the Brownlow medal favourites going to be ineligible for the award? Izak Heeney, let's have a listen to how our AFL Nation team called the incident yesterday at Marvel. Reasonably innocuous. He was trying to get separation from Webster on a lead. He's turned around and he's sort of thrown his forearm back and it hit him high. The umpire missed it and Heeney took an uncontested mark as Webster's sort of gone to the ground and there's blood coming from everywhere and he was attended to and they put some gauze up his nose to stop the bleeding. But there's no way he can escape a suspension for this, is there?
I don't think so. Not from the MRO. Maybe he might be able to argue it at the tribunal.
What could he argue?
I'm not sure. But
Force.
Well, whether it's a strike or not. So, I mean, he had a blood nose, Jimmy Webster, so I think it's pretty hard for him to get off on this. But there's a reason why this is intentional and not careless under the current system. Last year, I think this probably would have been careless. This year, I think it's intentional because the regulations have changed. It now reads, in instances where a player intends to forcefully push or fend an opposition player off the ball, the strike will usually, that's a key word, be graded as intentional rather than careless. So intentional, high contact, low impact is 1 week, ineligible to win the Brownlow. If this was careless and low impact, it would be a fine and he would still be eligible. So maybe they could argue that it was careless and not intentional, but I think the MRO has no choice here. And then the tribunal, I don't know what they're going to decide. I was surprised that Charlie Cameron got off earlier in the year. I was surprised that Patrick Dangerfield got off a couple of weeks ago at the tribunal. So who knows how strongly they can argue this. Do you think this is worthy of a suspension, this sort of incident?
Yes. Yep. Yes, I do. I think the broader question is, now that we are so strict on incidents such as these where once we weren't, should this leave you ineligible for the Brownlow medal? Should there be a threshold for weeks served before you miss suspension?
Of course there should be.
So there should be. So that's a different conversation. So, yep, he deserves a week. Does this incident mean that he can't win the game's biggest award? No, it shouldn't. And we're getting... No, if Dangerfield had been suspended for a week for that tackle and he was in Brownlow medal contention, it is unfair that you can't win the award for an incident that for 100 years has been allowed to play on, and now it's not.
It's
and
completely ridiculous that the AFL says fairness is at the very centre of the Brownlow medal, and the very threshold of fairness and what fairness means has shifted, yet they don't move with the times. They need to make a change in the off-season and make it clear that the only way you can be ineligible for a Brownlow is for an incident that is intentional in a way, or dirty, or behind the ball. These tackles and these moments, they're not worthy of missing out on a Brownlow medal. So we'll know today what happens with Izak Rankine, but I'd be surprised if the MRO didn't give him a week.
I won't be surprised about Izak Rankine, because there was a nasty incident with Starcevic off the ball that left him ruled out of the game after he failed a HIA, and this is Chris Fagan, the Brisbane coach, when he was asked about this incident post-game yesterday. When you have a player that isn't looking and it is off the ball and you go to initiate a really forceful bump and you get him high, whether that's a head clash, but even if it wasn't a head clash and it was just some damaged ribs or whether he was winded, I thought it was pretty poor from Izak Rankine. And this is an issue for him that he's going to have to get comfortable with, because largely for Izak Rankine, he's been allowed to run around with no one on him and do whatever he wants. Teams are not going to allow Izak Rankine to do that anymore. And the job Starcevic was doing on him was really disciplined. When he went off, it was Wilmot who did the job, and Izak Rankine was ineffective on the game, and the frustration boiled over. So how many is he looking at? Because he's not going to be under 3.
Minimum 3, looking at the matrix. Careless, severe impact. When you get concussed, it is always severe now. And high contact is a minimum of 3. And the AFL or the MRO might say, we'll give you 3, and Adelaide will accept, and that's fine. Everyone move on. We don't go to the tribunal. But the MRO might say, no, this needs to be sent to the tribunal, in which case he could get 4, or they might argue for 4.
Nothing surer than this goes to the tribunal.
Yeah. If you elect to bump and you injure the player, even if it is a head clash, you are liable.
Off the ball as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So I think it's pretty clear. So that's going to be a big loss for the Crows for at least 3 or 4 weeks.
You can have your say on that. 1300 736 736. Damien Hardwick, as we touched on a little bit earlier, was clearly frustrated after his loss again to North Melbourne on the weekend. Gold Coast, so put them in the basket of the Western Bulldogs, put it in the basket of Adelaide, no doubt about that. St Kilda, despite their terrific performance yesterday, but Gold Coast will be up there. Softest draw you've ever seen. The AFL desperate for them to play finals. All they need to do is win a couple of games away from home against the likes of North Melbourne, and they can't even deliver on that. So all the bold predictions in pre-season, 80% of the premiership list. Bob East is his name, isn't it? The chairman. Yep. When he sacked Stewie Jew, he said the expectation is finals. Damien Hardwick says it's time to win some bloody games. We could do a compilation on that. Might do it on Footy Classified tonight, of all the bold predictions that they made pre-season, and then marry that up with Damien Hardwick's comments post-game. They are a bit of a joke. Now, that's strong.
That's harsh because they have been a joke in the past, but they're still in contention to play finals.
But you go and get a three-time, and you've got all this talent coming through, but not just the young talent. I'm not talking about the first-year players. I'm talking about the young talent they've had that has been there for 6-7 years now and have played a lot of football together. They've got a couple of strong leaders, even though Witts didn't play, but there's others as well. When you're looking at Collins and Ballard, Rao and Miller, I know Miller was hurt, but they're a mess.
I disagree.
Is that too harsh?
I think you need to have their time again. They're not a mess.
What do you mean my time again?
Because they're not a mess.
What do you mean they're not a mess?
They were a mess as a football club.
They're 0 and 8. They sacked Stewie Dew when they were 7 and 9. That guy's looking back, like, honestly, in fits of laughter, Stewie Dew now.
They were a mess.
They sacked Stewie Dew at 7-9.
They
what
were
are they
a mess.
now?
They're not a mess anymore.
How?
Because they're still in contention to play finals. They can't win away, which is embarrassing.
And how do you reckon
It's
they'd
a bit
go in the
pathetic.
finals if they qualified for finals?
They're not playing like a finals team, clearly. But a mess is what they used to be. They've realigned themselves.
How?
To the point where they are still in contention to play finals at round 18. And
they're one game better off than where they were when they sacked a coach.
Yeah, but that's not a mess.
Well, so if you can't be in a bigger mess than sacking a coach, they're one game better off than that.
You can be in a bigger mess if you've got no good young players and you're down the bottom of the ladder.
Well, you'd want to have some good players when you get that many free kicks in the draft.
I'm not saying the Gold Coast Suns are going really well, clearly, but I'm still optimistic about their future, even though I'm frustrated about their current predicament.
No, I'm optimistic about their future as well. How could you not be when you've been given that many good young players? Like when you get 3 gold-clad players, of course, in 5 years' time, you'd be optimistic about the future, but how long can we be optimistic about the future?
Oh, I know. There is a sense of impatience and frustration around the Suns, which Damien Hardwick articulated after the game, which I share as well. They are pathetic away from home. Clearly, they are pathetic away from home. But their form at home tells me that they actually have some talent and have some backbone and can win. They just can't do it away from Queensland, which is such a shame for the football club because they should be playing finals.
All right, there was some brilliant performances as well over the weekend. We'll get to that. What a game it was at Marvel. Unexpected win to St Kilda. I certainly didn't see this coming. And I guess it does pose the question, are Sydney vulnerable after we've thought for
are they?
The majority of the season? I think there is, I still think they're going to be there. Prelim final weekend, I think they'll be their grand final weekend. But I guess when you play against Sydney, if you can shut down their uncontested game, which the Saints did really well. So once again, held them to 90 uncontested marks. Fremantle were terrific in doing the same and closing down that in a team way. There wasn't any individual sort of hard tags really. Like Gordon still had his 28. Heeney still had his 24 and kick 2. Warner had 23 and kick 2 as well. So it wasn't like last week where Fremantle were able to completely nullify that Sydney midfield. But across the board, if you shut down their uncontested marking game. But I still look at it and go, well, if Sydney kicks straight, they win by 5 goals.
Yeah.
Like, so is it as simple as that sometimes where you go, Sydney kicked 3-6 in the third quarter to the Saints 5 straight. And then in the last quarter, the Saints kicked 4 goals to Sydney's 0 goals 5.
It was 9-2 to 3-11 after half time.
So if Sydney kicks straight, they win. And I know that is disrespectful to the Saints, and I know we've got to give them their flowers. And I thought it was an outstanding performance. I love some of their ball movement. I love seeing Philippou back into the side. Thought Henry was enormous. Thought Wanganeen, all their prime movers got going. I thought Marshall is just an outstanding ruckman. His last 2 weeks have been huge, and he looks dangerous going forward. But it's as simple as if Sydney kicks straight, they win by 4 goals, and we're not talking about Sydney being vulnerable.
Yeah, that's true, but it's probably also been the case in previous games this year where other teams have kicked poorly against the Swans.
Correct.
So it swings and roundabouts, and the Saints took their chances, which is part of the game. What does it say about St Kilda that they can defeat Collingwood in round 2 games after they won a flag, and Sydney in round 17 when they're 2 games clear on top of the ladder, and yet they're 14th on the table? Like, what has happened to their season and why are they out of finals contention so early?
They've lost a lot of close games, haven't they? So for them to hold on in a close one was good. I think far too often they've been really conservative in the first half. And once again, that was the case yesterday. Like, not even 30 points at half time. And then in the second half, they go, okay, we've got to actually try and win this game of footy. And they get their game going. They're more daring with their ball movement. And they chase the game. Whereas in the first half, they're far too conservative. And I think that has been the case. Look, they kicked 6 goals in a row against the Giants. last week against Port Adelaide, they stormed home. They've done it
Gabba.
in previous weeks, against Brisbane. So when the risk of losing isn't there in terms of, okay, we've got to chase this win, then they play a completely different way. But Saints fans, you can have your say. Certainly been a really disappointing year, but yesterday gave you something to cheer about. Let's have a listen to John Longmire, the Sydney coach, after Logan McDonald had a crack at winning it for the second week in a row and missed. Logan McDonald took the mark and he didn't hesitate. He said, no, I'm having a shot.
Yep.
So after missing the previous week, I thought that was a good sign. I thought he struck it pretty well and missed, but I did love that he took the responsibility to try and win it for his team.
I agree. And he's had a big week. So that happened last Saturday, which was a shank off the side of the boot or a slice. He then re-signs for 4 years on Friday, 4-year extension to free agency. Big signature for the Sydney Swans and a big show of faith from Logan McDonald. The Swans have done so well, and then he does that on Sunday. It's been a big 7 days.
Let's talk about the Western Bulldogs, because a few weeks ago you said if they miss the finals, you still think it is likely that Luke Beveridge will be moved on. Here he is speaking after the Port Adelaide loss on Saturday. They missed the finals.
Yeah, I think he's in trouble if they miss the finals. I've said that the whole way through, and I agree. And those parameters haven't shifted. I mean, there might be a world where they could finish ninth on percentage and he could remain, but they're all about improvement this year, the Western Bulldogs. They finished ninth last year, and their next 3 games are very difficult. They play 1, 2, and 5 on the ladder in the next 3 games, then the Western Bulldogs after that. So with Carlton, Geelong, and Sydney to come, the next 3 weeks for Luke Beveridge and the Western Bulldogs is significant.
Yep, Carlton at Marvel. They've got Geelong at GMHBA. They've got Sydney at the SCG. They've got Melbourne at Marvel. Then they go to Adelaide and take on the Crows, which isn't that easy. There's been a lot of positivity around the Western Bulldogs and the way that they've hung in there and turned their form around. But that's what happens when you play 6 out of 7 games at Marvel.
What do you mean? You get used to it.
Well,
under the roof.
What an advantage to not travel at all. And there's a week off there in the mix as well. What other team gets that benefit to not travel and play 6 out of 7 at Marvel? And then we're looking at their form and going, geez, they're playing well. Well, no joke, they're playing well because they don't leave Marvel. And then the minute they have to leave, they turn up and serve that up.
Well, Collingwood are playing 6 of their next 7 at the MCG.
Yeah, 100% same applies. So you watch Collingwood win probably 5 out of those games.
Yeah, but you're critical of the Gold Coast Suns for travelling poorly.
Yeah.
So what's the best balance then? I mean, do you want a team to travel the whole time so they get used to it, or are you trying to?
No, I'm just saying that some teams don't know how good they've got it in a fully national competition. And I said this yesterday. Damien Hardwick's finally realising it's pretty difficult being a non-Victorian coach where you don't play 14 at the MCG and you actually have to get on a plane regularly and travel. It is hard. And even Sydney found that out yesterday. Geelong coach Chris Scott speaking on their pretty emphatic win over Hawthorn on Saturday. They won by 51 points in the end, and he's right. And I think we said it at the time, like his ability to maintain a level head and a composure about him comes with experience and knowing his side and the game really well and how things can quickly turn. But from the first bounce in that game, you could tell it was a different Geelong outfit, and it was an impressive performance against a side that was going pretty well.
Yeah, and the shifts he's made have been important as well.
Yeah.
Sam DeConing in the ruck looks really good. Jeremy Cameron playing closer to goal. Tom Stewart in the midfield. I find the Cats really hard to read, Kane. They were 7-0, then they went 1-6 over the next 7. Now they've won their last 2. How do you read them? How much of a threat are they, do you think?
I don't think they can win it. I think they've got some personnel struggles, particularly through the midfield. So when they come up against the likes of Sydney and Carlton, I'm just not sure how they can match it with those 2 teams through the midfield. But what they do with what they've got is unbelievable, really. The whole of the footy club impresses me every year. I love the attitude. I would love to be a Geelong supporter because every year your team is going to rock up and try and win the premiership, and there's going to be no doubt about your mission, and that is the mission, and that's why. What's his record is extraordinary.
70% winning record or something ridiculous.
But just the amount of times he's going to get his team to finals is extraordinary. So, you're right on Stewart, but I said this yesterday. Like, for opposition teams to be that bamboozled by a simple move to put Tom Stewart on ball, you can still tag him. I just don't understand why teams, just because he's moved on ball and probably looking at Sam Mitchell here and Essendon the week before. You've got someone set for Tom Stewart. Let the centre bounce play out, and then after the centre bounce plays out, put your player that was assigned to Tom Stewart on him in a tag, because the benefit that has had, like, it ripped them apart, Geelong, and it ripped Tom Stewart apart, and I thought his attitude around that and his inability to deal with it was significant. So for the teams that play Geelong for the rest of the year, even though he's playing on ball, you can still tag him, and I'd be surprised if that doesn't happen from here on in. Now, the flip side is Hawthorn, and the little lesson that they have got, I don't think it's going to be a bad thing for the young Hawks. Here's the coach, Sam Mitchell, post-game. Yeah, I think that we knew that, didn't we?
Well, they've played like a top 4 team the last few weeks. This was a performance that, this was a game, if played at the MCG, I think would have been played out completely differently. Cardinia Park is such a fortress for Geelong. They played in such a great way. Jimmy Bartell spoke about it last night on Footy Furnace, the way they set up the ground. It's very hard to go there and win. But I think the Hawks can compete with anyone on their day. I think that's a little bit of a cop-out.
I just don't think it was never about this year, though, for Hawthorn.
No, that's true. That's true.
There's never, like, the talk about, will Hawthorn be there on prelim final week? It was never about that. It was about improvement again. And if they got themselves to qualify for finals and have that experience, magnificent. But it wasn't about this year. It's about the next 2 or 3 years for Hawthorn, where they're building towards something. They don't have their captain there, and defensively that hurt them with the way that they set up. They didn't have Ginnivan there. And once you take out a couple of those players, Mitch Lewis back for his first game was injured in that, and I'll get your thoughts on that shortly. But yeah, I don't think this is a bad one, but it's one that you go away and go, we didn't handle the pressure from an experienced side. We were too fumbly. We weren't strong enough in the contest, and we couldn't get our game going. Sam Mitchell would know exactly where they sit, and they've won 8 for the year, which was the same as last year, and then they work their way through trying to get some big wins on the way home.